Good afternoon or good morning, depending upon where you are in this great country of ours. I'm Roger Demikowski, and would like to welcome you to the May 31st edition of the ABU Town Hall. On behalf of the trustees and staff of the American Board of Urology, we feel this is a very important aspect of our mission of transparency to you and to also keep lines of communication and open such that we can answer questions and inform you of how the ABU is managing some of these difficult times that we're in. And again, thank you so much for spending some time on a hallowed time on a Sunday morning or afternoon, again, depending on your geography. We very much appreciate it in this time of great international, national, and even local stress and turmoil due to the variety of incidents that are going on that the country and the world are dealing with currently. Next slide, please. We have a robust agenda. I will begin with a brief introduction and board update. Dr. David Joseph will follow with a lifelong learning update for approximately 10 minutes. Our executive director, Brant Thrasher, will then follow with a brief COVID-19 update. Gary Lamack will then come on with a continuing examination update, certifying examination update, that he will perform for approximately 5 minutes. And then Doug Huseman at 1:30 will present the qualifying exam update. That'll again be followed by Brant presenting some continued certification matters as they pertain to the ABU, especially in light of some other continuing certification attempts and systems that other boards are doing within the American Board of Internal Medicine. And then we hope to have about 20 minutes for questions and answers. For your questions and answers, please, if you'll go to the following link, it's a secure link, https abu2.org/questions. And it will handle those questions as you watch on your YouTube link. Next slide, please. This is who the board is. This is our most recent group photograph, which was taken during the oral boards in February in Dallas. And you can see who your board members are. The board spans all geographies in the United States and represents both private as well as academic urologists in practice. Next slide. These are our current delineated members with our various officers on the left. I want to reference David Joseph, who's our immediate past president and is also now our official representative to the ABIM regarding lifelong learning. He's brought a wealth of experience and knowledge to this and will certainly help shepherd us through the next few years of change related to this process. I'd also like to welcome our two new trustees, Chris Kane, who's at San Diego, and Cheryl Lee, who is in Columbus. They are newly installed trustees this year. Next slide, please. These are, many of you wonder where the board members come, the trustees to the board come. We are actually nominated by members within member societies within urology. As you can see, the AUA has the largest group of constituent membership nomination attempts. That's followed by the genitourinary surgeons, the American College of Surgeons, the American Association of Clinical Urology, the Society of Pediatric Urology, and the Society of Academic Urology. And you can see the breakdown of nominees and how that is, how they contribute to the overall actual trustee list that you saw presented previously. Next slide. There's often a question about the differences between the role of the ABU and the AUA. And this slide simply makes the division clear. Most of the trustees, in fact, all the trustees on the call and on the board have had significant roles in the AUA at one time or another. However, these two organizations have different frames of reference. The ABU's targets from the standpoint of focus are the public and you, the diplomat. The AUA targets practicing urologists and healthcare providers within urology. The ABU's goals are safe, high quality, efficient, and ethical care. Obviously, the goal of the AUA is to promote the highest standards of care. And then there's a variety of instruments that both groups use that actually are mutually informative, specifically around education and ongoing continuing exposure to new as well as review topics within urology. Next slide. Next slide. You can't do this without a team, and I just wanted to give kudos to our ABU staff who are pictured here. In the far left is Lindsay, who is our executive administrator for our office, and she's just outstanding. We take great pride in the customer service that our office delivers. Frankly, I don't mean to sound parochial, but we have one of the best boards in terms of customer interactions with you, the diplomats. We take great pride in our communication and our responsiveness. So please, the board is always open for calls. The board office will get you the answer or help you through problems as they arise. I also want to just, for frame of reference, note in the upper right corner is Brant Thrasher, who's our executive director, who is essentially our continuity over the years for the conduct and practice of the board. Great group of people. We have recently done some significant changes to the website at your suggestion and request, so we hope the portal is much easier to use. We'll discuss some specific things related to that as we move forward through this various presentation. So again, the ABU really welcomes calls and interactions, and we favor communication. One last thing that I'll say is we can't communicate with you if we don't know if you've moved or changed your address and or other contacts. So please, in this time where a lot of people are having to change, please keep in mind to keep us informed of email as well as address changes so that we can keep you informed of information that you absolutely need as you progress forward in the various processes that are part of our overview process. Okay, at this point, I'll hand over the baton to Dr. David Joseph. David?
Thanks, Roger. My first slide, please. Do you see it? Is that up? Because I don't see it.
Lindsay, we're not seeing your screen projecting with the slides, please.
What I plan to do in the next few minutes, once the slides are up, is talk with you a little bit about where we stand with continuing certification and lifelong learning. And as soon as Lindsay can get the slides up, we can move forward.
David, you want to make some introductory comments until we can get the slides up? Thank you.
Yes. And until we get those up, first of all, I think it's important everybody recognizes the goals for continuing certification. And what we're trying to do is support lifelong learning. We want to promote diplomat competency. It's helpful to improve standards of care. And we also need to provide to the public notification of those urologists who are board certified, and also those urologists who are participating in lifelong learning. You can go to my third slide. Go to the next one. So go back one. Thank you. So where are we now? This shows you what the diplomat portal looks like, and I encourage all of you to frequently visit the portal, and it'll see where you stand in lifelong learning. This is a screenshot of where I stand, and this is from yesterday. And on here, it provides a lot of information regarding the activities you're needed to complete during level 1 and level 2. The primary difference between level 1 and level 2 is that in level 2, you also have the need to do case logs. You're going to present your complication, your death narratives, and finally, you'll be presented with the exam. Next slide, please. So we appreciate that lifelong learning is, in a sense, a living organism, and it's chronically evolving. And the reasons for that is we need to be meeting standards set by the ABMS. And periodically, the ABMS will review their standards for lifelong learning and continued certification and come out with new requirements. They're currently in the process of setting the new standards, which will go in effect, we think, later this year. As we continue to evolve, we want to make sure that anything we do as far as a change meets those standards. Equally, and probably more important, is the feedback we've received from the diplomats, particularly through our town halls. We realize, particularly related to the exam, that it's not time and cost effective. And we also lack some of the contemporary learning tools. COVID-19 obviously has put us in a situation where we realize we need to be flexible. And I want to just take a moment here and answer some of the early questions we received. As it stands now, we do plan to have the October exams in place at Pearson's Testing Center. Now, obviously, if the environment does not permit that, we'll have to make changes. But we've heard back from many diplomats that they've used the downtime for studying, and they've asked us not to postpone anything in the future. For those of you who are concerned, Pearson has done a very nice job at highlighting the steps they've maintained or are taking to maintain your safety. If you still feel uncomfortable with taking the exam, you will be provided the opportunity to submit for a variance, particularly if you're in the 10th year and you're going to time out if you don't take the exam. If you're not in the 10th year, you're comfortable to postpone the exam until next year. Next slide. I'd like to spend a little time on the exam itself. We call it a knowledge, judgment, and skills exam. It's a practice-based exam, and all of you know that you select a module that's supposed to fit into your practice. We recognize that the 4 modules we have don't fit everyone's practice. And this year, under a lot of work by Dr. Hoosman, one of the modules had been transitioned to an office-based practice. And we're hoping that this will fit into those individuals who have just a generalized practice. At the present time, we have a point-in-time exam, which means we give it once every 10 years. We were one of the first boards and continue to be one of the only boards that has this as low stakes, meaning that you cannot fail or not pass continuing certification by your performance on the exam. And we have a lot of questions coming in now regarding angst about taking the exam and how do I study for it. The point is it's low stakes, meaning that if you do poorly, you'll be directed to areas of CME remediation related to your deficits. But we recognize that as it stands now, the exam is high security, which means you have to take it in a Pearson View Center. It's disruptive to your clinical practice and it's disruptive to your lifestyle. Next slide. So what we want to do in the future is have activities be continuous and formative. Regardless of the changes we make, we are not going to go back and have anything high stakes. Some of the individuals have questioned why we even have an exam when other boards, when they talk to their peers and other boards have moved away from exams. While it appears they have moved away from exams, they haven't moved away from the high stakes nature. And many of the other boards have different activities, but their diplomats have to meet a certain bar in order to continue. And they can fail and pass out of continued certification if they don't meet that bar. We are not going to have that type of atmosphere with any of our learning activities. The next question is moving from high security to a low security. And there are a lot of good questions that came in regarding why can't we do this at a medical school testing site like the medical students do or other testing sites. And technically you can do that, The problem with it is it's even more limited as far as the sites available for our diplomats. And it wouldn't be fair to all diplomats to do it at testing centers. What we want to do is take it a step further and actually individualize all learning activities in the future, where you're able to take this on your own time sequence in your own environment you feel most comfortable and on your own computer. And we really, as we move forward, want to make sure this is not disruptive to your clinical practice and personal lifestyle. Next slide. So what I'm going to present here is what we're presenting as a trial protocol to ABMS, and we hope that this is going to come out in 2021. And we're basing this on a continuous 5-year cycle. We're planning on having alternating yearly activities, where in years 1 and 3, you'll be presented with a requirement to answer questions in a format very similar to what you see on the self-assessment study program, where you'll be given a question, you answer it, you'll give an immediate response regarding your performance, and there'll be a little discussion about why the answer was correct or incorrect, and then you'll be directed to specific resources if you want further information. In years 2 to 4, we're partnering with the AUA on developing a library of journal articles where you will select journal articles of interest, read those articles, and complete that process. We're hoping that with the AUA, you can also use this component for CME activity and credit. For those individuals, and there's not many, who fall below our standard of requirement, the 5th year, you will take a specific exam that looks at your knowledge and tries to identify gaps. And within that, you'll be then assigned to individualized CME learning as we currently do now. Next slide. So in a little more specifics, the way we want flexibility to occur is that in year 1 and 3, when you're doing the question review, again, modular based, we're going to provide a 3-month window. And within that, once you start taking the exam, you'll have a 6-week clock to complete the exam questions that you're presented on a self-paced program. Honestly, with this, if you wanted to complete it in a couple hours in one day, you could. If you want to take 1 question a day, you'll easily be able to complete that during the 6-week cycle. In years 2 to 4, for the journal review, you'll have a selection of journals and articles that will be identified based on your module, but you will not be required to specifically stay within your module. If there's a journal article outside that appears to be of interest, there's no reason you couldn't read through that. And again, you'll be given a 10-month window to complete that process. If you wanted to, you could complete it in a day or so, or you could do 1 article over a month. The whole goal of this is to continue with individualized learning environment. With that, I'll turn it over to Brant for his comments.
Thank you, David. Thanks, everybody. And thanks so much for taking some time on your Sunday for joining us. Do you have my slides, Lindsay? What I want to go over today are some of the adjustments that the American Board of Urology has done to ease a little bit of the burden on you and your practice, your families, your patients, obviously. One of the things that's come up on multiple occasions is, why do we have to even think about doing an exam in the secure environment? Why not at home? We just can't afford to do that with our current validity and reliability of our test questions. There's been an awful lot of time and money creating a secure environment. If we did this and we did it at home, or let's say we decided to do it at an institution similar to the in-service examination, we recognize that those questions get out. If that happened, then we would ruin the validity and reliability of our examination. That would hurt everyone. Certainly our bank has to remain secure, and with such a small board spending so much money to make sure that we do have a very reliable and secure exam, that would be something we just couldn't afford to do. We do know in-service examinations have been copied. We actually go out and review what's going on the internet. We've seen those questions. So it's just something we can't afford to do. But we also want to make adjustments that will make it easier for you to meet the requirements in this current pandemic. Next slide. We've had a couple of questions about the board and how is the administrative staff working now. I think very, very well. We've worked remotely since March 16th. We pride ourselves on having 8 folks that answer the phone call for 12,800 or so diplomates and candidates. And we've tried very hard to make sure when you call that office, you get a person to talk to, not an audix. So we will continue to personally answer calls. If you have specific calls for Brant Thrasher, there's no reason that you can't get a hold of me. They'll make sure it's directing me. I've actually talked to a number of you about the pandemic, about testing, about a little bit of everything. And I'm very willing to take any calls that you feel are necessary. As far as our annual certificate fee timelines, we've extended those with no late fees. In fact, almost all of, whether it's log submission, annual certification fees, we really have said we're not going to punish folks for not getting these in on time. We're trying to make sure we remain very flexible, and we're here to help, not hurt. We've waived associated processing fees. It cost us money for you to be able to pay these fees with credit card. Had a $5 associated processing fee. We've waived all of those too to make it much easier for you. Next slide. As far as our recertification requirements, a few questions have come in, I think appropriately so, about what are you doing for folks that need to do CME? I went online and made sure that anything, our offerings that we're offering, it did not require you to go to our annual meeting. It didn't require you to go to a meeting at all. We're trying to make sure the requirements for those that had CME remediation assigned, you could get those. It could either come from, for instance, an AUA update, something online, an instructional course online, trying to make it easier for you, understanding that it's very difficult this time for folks to travel or to get to particular meetings. Log submission timelines have been extended for those recertifying. We actually went out and asked, you've got a 3-year time period to recertify for the level 2. So meaning 7 to 9, even out to the 10th year. We have said we're remaining very flexible. We had asked folks that were going to be recertifying for their first time, so year 7. Hey, maybe you want to postpone it. We had double the number of phone calls saying, no, my elective surgeries have actually left me with a vacuum now. I've got time to actually get this all together. I'd rather do it this year. And we actually have a record number coming in. We're probably going to have over 700 submissions this year. And we've gotten almost all of those logs in. So it does turn out that most folks want to continue on with this. They don't want to skip. They like to go on and recertify. No late fees associated with submission, as mentioned. And as I said, we did recommend or encourage first opportunity, wait. Very few have done that. Next slide. As far as testing changes, the qualifying examination I mentioned is still a high secure environment. It will remain that way. I think all boards have continued to do the exact same thing. They will remain that way. It's very difficult, I know, for people to understand, well, why would it be for blank board? They decided to do it this way. Understand that some have 6 cycles throughout the year. We do not. We have 1. With 6 cycles and a July exam and then a September exam to follow, a lot have had to make some significant changes on the fly. And some have had to revert to doing something at home, understanding it could really hurt them. Now, much of them, those folks are much larger. Internal medicine alone gives 6,000 tests in 1 cycle. So you can understand how that might be very, very different having that many diplomates. We don't. And so we haven't had to worry so much about doing something that would put our testing environment or put our database at risk. So instead, we went to January 13 and 14. We started working on this in April, knowing that we were probably going to have a backlog of folks trying to still get into Pearson centers. If you look at us with so few people, you could look at the folks that are doing, for instance, the pharmacist exam or commercial truck driver's exam, the folks that are doing exams for that are going to be real estate brokers. Those are hundreds of thousands of folks. And we're really small and knew that we were going to probably have a backlog. We went ahead and went into January feeling that that was going to be probably best. We didn't want to do it too soon. I know people have been studying, but now you've got folks, for instance, in the July, August timeframe that are moving and trying to set up practice. Same thing in September, trying to get established. And you look into October, 5 of the AUA section meetings are during that month. And then November, December, holiday months. We felt that January was going to be best. Pearson VUE has given us January 13th and 14th. This will not in any way affect the oral examination schedule. So that schedule stays exactly the same. The fact that you're taking written a little bit later won't affect that at all. Recertification is still on track for October 2020. As Dr. Joseph mentioned, I think Pearson VUE has done a great job of making some very good changes: social distancing, sanitizing. You must have a mask to come in. I would really recommend going on to Pearson VUE Center and seeing some of what they're going to do to make sure they look after your safety. I will tell you, we'll likely be sending out some bullet points to let you know what to expect at the Pearson VUE Centers, but we've been extremely happy with our contacts there and how they've been very accommodating, making sure that your safety is first and foremost. Oral examinations will have to likely be adjusted some. I'm going to let Dr. Lamack will talk more about that. I mean, we have to think about social distancing. We've already purchased PPE, everything from masks to disposable gloves. We're going to do everything we can to make sure you're in a safe test and a very fair testing environment. And we obviously, like many other boards, are researching virtual oral examinations. Very few places can even pull that off right now. Difficult to do, but for folks that might be sick or could in fact have to take a makeup, we'd like to have that available. Probably not for this year, but maybe in the future. It's something we'll continue to research. So next slide. I want you to understand that we will continue to monitor the effects of COVID-19 on diplomats and candidates. We recognize that this domino effect of case logs, there's going to be an effect there. We understand that, but you also understand your logs are all compared to your peer group. So folks are going to be in, if everyone is noticing that they have fewer cases, that'll be reflected. It wouldn't hurt you. Additionally, we do recognize, and we've been working with the ACGME very closely to make sure that we can keep our hands around how do we deal with minimum case numbers, et cetera. We have 2 folks that are all from our board that are on the RRC. So we're working hand in hand to make sure that this is something obviously out of your control that's not going to hurt you. And we'll continue to remain flexible and collaborative during these trying times. The last thing you need to think about is that make it more difficult. We give you the arduous task of putting the hammer down. We don't want to do that at all. We want to be flexible and collaborative during this pandemic. So thank you.
Gary, why don't you go ahead and begin your discussion, please?
Okay, thanks, Roger, Brant, David. So Gary Lamack, I'm the chairman of the certifying exam, and I just wanted to, for the next few minutes, briefly summarize what we're thinking about with the certifying exam that's upcoming next year. So first and foremost, a couple of questions came in. We believe that the oral exam remains really a critical aspect of the certification process. There are aspects of the oral exam that simply can't be replicated by a written multiple choice exam. And in addition, of course, to urologic knowledge, responses to a changing clinical environment, communication skills, professionalism, ascertained during the oral exam itself, these are things that we just can't replicate during a written exam. And the log review and complications narrative also remain a critical part of the whole certifying process. So we recognize this needs to continue, and we believe it's a really important part of the certification process. At the current time, we believe that a face-to-face meeting with direct dialogue between examiner and a candidate for the oral exam is the best means of accomplishing those goals of the certifying exam. And as of now, the next oral exam remains scheduled for Dallas in February of 2021. Nonetheless, I'd say we understand that the previous means by which we assured exam security, which did of course include keeping a large group of candidates in a large conference space waiting for the examination to start, may no longer meet the standards with regard to minimizing close contact and virus transmission. And we are certainly aware of the concerns you may have and we have regarding your safety of the examination, and that remains really sort of our foremost concern. And that being the case, we've already begun to explore means to alter the examination process in order to, for example, eliminate sequestration of candidates. And we fully intend to minimize the exposure for both the examinees and the candidates. And as soon as those details are finalized, and they will be in the next several months, we will be communicating you directly with the candidate so you know exactly what we're planning as we plan for the oral exam in 2021. In addition, we have already been in touch with the Grand Hyatt in Dallas to assure that we have the ability to safely and securely administer the oral exam in this new environment that we are all in. The hotel staff has assured us that we have the conference space and staff to administer the examination, meeting all safety requirements. This will very clearly adhere to all local and state requirements. And just as an FYI, at the current time, there are no quarantine rules in effect for travel to Texas, regardless of the city of origin within the United States. Obviously, that's always subject to change, but that's where we are right now. We have and we will continue to investigate other means of delivering the certifying examination, as Brant mentioned. Understanding that the situation may change and at some point an in-person examination may not be feasible, that doesn't appear to be the case right now, but we are researching other opportunities. At the current time, we remain concerned that the security of an online platform for an oral examination is inadequate right now for our purposes. We will continue to explore this and other options for the certifying examination as we head into the future. There were a couple of questions with regard to logs, and Brant mentioned this as well. Recall that your logs, we now understand that logs during this pandemic, there have been significant changes to your logs and what you're submitting to us. As you are aware, there's really no systematic requirement for surgical cases to enter the certifying examination process, different than getting it for the qualifying exam in the initial phases of certification. So you really compare to your peers who are also taking the examination. So each candidate, of course, will be reviewed individually, and we understand the reduction in cases. And if there are particular concerns with your log, we will contact you. But please be rest assured, we understand the impact, and we don't believe the reduction in cases and procedures attributable to the pandemic really will influence or impact your ability to sit for the certifying exam. We will continue to work for you. I would like to point out, as Brandon mentioned, we are exploring other options in the future, not even outside of the pandemic, and how we can adjust the certifying examination process, make it better, improve it, and potentially skills training and other aspects that maybe more closely replicate your practice. And so we have begun to research these even before this all occurred. So we will change and progress with time independent of the current events surrounding COVID-19. So thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any questions regarding the certifying exam as we get forward to the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Doug Huseman will now talk about the qualifying exam. Doug?
Lindsay, can you share my slides, please? I'm going to reiterate some of the points that Dr. Threischer had previously made. What happened when we had the COVID crisis is, first of all, the Pearson's Testing Center was closed. This resulted in the cancellation of the exams in July. As was alluded to, we certainly started looking into alternatives. We looked at the ITS, which is how the in-service examination is given, seeing if we could give it to you on a secure computer at your house. However, as been mentioned, the security concerns were such that this was not going to be capable for us to perform in this fashion. We subsequently went ahead and looked for a time when we could do the Pearson testing centers. Again, Dr. Threischer alluded to this, but we wanted to choose a time that would not interfere with you establishing a new practice. We wanted to choose a time that was far enough out that there was no risk of canceling. And so the dates of January 13th and 14th were chosen. Our original concern was that we may have a decrease in the number of candidates that may be testing this. Right now we have 341 candidates scheduled for those two examinations. Our normal range is about 310 to 325, so we actually have more candidates taking this test, and it will not impact the timing that you will be able to set for your oral board examinations. That will stay the same. Again, I would be happy to address any questions you may have at the open Q&A answer session. Dr. Threischer?
Thanks, Doug. I was going to make a couple of comments regarding why can't we just put everything on hold? Pediatrics has done that. Internal medicine has done that. And I want to answer it in this way. Please remember that we are still on a 10-year cycle. I, for instance, am on my third cycle for recertification. And in doing so, basically, I took 1 day at the VA, did my part 1, did my safety module, professionalism module, got my peer review done. And then basically I've been waiting for 2 years for now to go into level 2 for the 7 through 9 year, where I will end up doing my log submission and take the test. Now, what you need to understand is that internal medicine and pediatrics are actually ongoing, meaning that they have a point system for both of them. If you go online just to look at what's required, it would be very, very difficult, unless you're doing something almost all the time, to meet their requirements. They were almost forced in this pandemic to shut their program down or put a pause for a period of time and basically stop their point system because people just could not keep up. I think it'd be hard enough reading what they have to go through to keep up, period. We're not in that cycle. We're trying to make changes, and we've made so many changes based on town hall. If you look back, one of the first changes was we got away from a pass-fail examination at 10 years. We recognized that was not something that you enjoyed at all. Number two, we then changed to a modular examination that better reflected what you did in your own practice, and then have changed that twice so that we now have office-based practice added in. And I think, again, a better reflection of what's going on the street, what's going on with the day-to-day practice for urology. We're now looking, as David has mentioned, at what I would consider to be much better, so that you can do questions in the warmth of your home on your own computer with an open period of time that allows you pretty much to do one question a day and get it done. It's that easy, and I think that informative. So I do believe we've listened to you. These town halls have been, to me, I think, informative for us, hopefully informative for you. But there's some big differences between what many boards are doing and what we're doing. I personally believe, I'm a little bit biased, obviously, is that we've tried to meet your needs. We've been listening and listening well as we can, and tried to make effective changes to meet your expectations. But again, we also do not want in any way to what I would consider to be release or loosen what we considered a very high standard, meaning that very few people can meet that standard and be a urologist. And we don't take that lightly. That is when you're certified by the American Board of Urology, it's meaningful. We want to keep it meaningful, but we also recognize we don't want to make it too overbearing or too arduous of a task, but allow you to hopefully keep up with the specialty as it's ever changing, and allow you to fill knowledge gaps and remediate as appropriate, help you up with your practice. So that's to answer the questions of why is it that your program is so different from some of the others. I mean, right now, as I said, we're still in a very different position from some of the other boards that have had to basically put the brakes on because it was so continuous. They had to be doing something all the time, which is not our current situation.
Thank you, Brent. Just to remind everyone, the link for questions is abu2.org/questions. If you'll just submit those, we'll get them moving. I do want to stress to you that this presentation will be available on YouTube as an archive, so you can certainly access it after we're done, and would welcome that. There was a question related to the periodicity of how frequently we're going to do these, and we will be doing more communication via the webinar / town hall format, given all the travel restrictions and whatnot, and we will keep you informed of when our next webinar will be. One question that's come forward, and David, I'm going to direct this question to David Joseph. David, a question is, with the 2021 model that you just described, does this mean the 10-year research process with exam and application goes away?
We will continue to have level 1 and level 2 within the process. Level 2 also containing the case logs, complication narratives, death narratives. What will go away is the exam in level 2. So if you're participating in the new protocol that we're describing, you will not be required to take the 10-year exam at a Pearson Center.
Thank you, David. Brent, let me ask you this question. There have been several questions related to how to prepare for the recertification exams, specifically some of the subspecialty recertification exams. Would you just comment on preparation and content of the exams in general, and best preparation methods?
Yeah, good question, Roger. I mean, I've seen several of those questions come through. We have notified the AUA that we have moved the qualifying examination. We're keeping our recertification exam where it is in October, moved the QE over to January 13th, 14th. With that, they're going to try to make proper adjustments in their review courses. What I will tell you is this: if you are preparing for recertification right now, my recommendation would be, and we have not been shy about advertising this. If you look over 5 years of the last SAST examination, so the last 5 years, and you are familiar with our guidelines, you're going to get over 35 to 40% of the questions correct. So what I would tell you is that's your best study method. Most of the folks that are still doing the module in female pelvic medicine are also, they tell me that at least the ones that I've talked to said, no, that's very reflective of what I needed to know for the recertification examination. And I do think that even though we're not one to try to sell one review course over the other, because we don't have any horse in that race, I do think a review course for the candidates that are out there getting ready to take their oral examination is important. Important in the sense of understanding systematically how it works, how you feel when you're in a pressured environment, which is part of being a surgeon, sitting in front of an examiner asking you not rapid fire questions, but making decisions quickly. Part of the oral examination is the decision-making process. And you really don't duplicate that unless you sit down with someone and across from them, not necessarily a colleague, but someone that can give you a test like that to see how you perform. And more often than not, I hear people say, you know, I really kind of froze when I got into that situation if I had not done it previously. So I do think it prepares you to do as many dry runs as possible. So that would be my recommendation going into the oral examination or going into recertification.
Roger, Doug Hoosman here. Can I also add something that Dr. Threischer alluded to?
Please.
For the lifelong learning exam, 40% of those questions will be coming off of the last 5 years SASP. So just as Dr. Threischer alluded to, reviewing the guidelines in the SASP is critical. Also, the board has put on what topics are in each category on the ABU site. So if an individual is going to take the core, which we all have to, or the new office of a new exam for office-based urology, the subjects we will test are listed at the ABU site. So they may want to pay attention to the SASP and directly to the topics that they will be tested on.
Thank you, Doug. David, can you? There's been a question asking you to elaborate on the pilot project and how people will be able to opt in or out of it.
Yeah, I think that's a very important question. Thank you, Roger. First of all, it's a pilot, and what that means is we need to have several of our diplomats follow through with this, so then we can show to the ABMS that it is a successful process. What we're planning on doing is next year for those individuals entering Lifelong Learning 2 who are starting in their 7th year. So you could potentially apply for the standard exam at Pearson's. You could elect to go into this program. And after we run that for 2 years, if we can show that the diplomats actually have benefited from the process of the change, then we'll move forward to having everyone enter it. So it is going to be a process that's going to take a few years to get into. It'll be an elective process for individuals, and we're hoping again that that'll start next year.
Thank you, David. There is a question about what would happen to the October recertification exam dates if there's another COVID-19 surge. I'll let Brent elaborate on that, but I will say that one of the points that we really hope that comes out of today's discussion is that we are adapting to circumstances. As you see, many of the dates have changed in order to make the process better, more facile for you. So we have moved some dates. Obviously, no one knows what's going to happen at the end of the summer. I think we've all heard projections that may indicate at least the possibility of another viral spike. We just don't know. So Brent, do you want to give any specific comments about if we have another viral surge around the October dates?
Yet somebody actually asked that I turn on my camera. I guess they want to see that I'm actually wearing clothes during this time, and I am. So I just wanted to say that Roger, I have no idea. That question is a good one, but one that we have been considering. We've talked to Pearson and stayed in touch with them over and over. I think that if that happens, then we would have to make some adjustments and reschedule. And obviously, if people were in their last testing cycle, we would have to give those folks variances and move on. We have taken all of that into consideration. We don't feel like, I mean, you and I both know, and I think the rest of the urologic world knows, this COVID is going to be with us for the foreseeable future. We expect that for the next 12 to 24 months, we'll be dealing with it until we've gotten a vaccine that's an effective vaccine and or herd immunity. So from our standpoint, it's something we've got to just keep our finger on the pulse of. And as soon as we know something or we see that we need to make a change, we'll try to affect that change and then make sure that what we're not doing is making it another arduous task for people that just can't at last minute make an adjustment. So we'll remain flexible. We're keeping our finger on the pulse. And as soon as we know there need to be changes or we're seeing a spike, we'll be looking into having to change, and then we'll notify them as soon as we possibly can.
Doug or David, there have been a series of questions about how best to prepare for recertification review, and whether there are courses or what topic matter might be best to cover. Would you, either of you, care to make just some general statements about that?
Roger, again, I'll reiterate for the lifelong learning, this is not including the PEDS group. But what I would suggest is that you go to the ABU website and see the sections that you'll be taking. Everybody takes the core, and then whatever subsection you would be taking. The topics are actually listed on the ABU's website that you will be tested on. As alluded to by Dr. Thrasher, about 40% of the questions will come right off the past 5 years SASP. I would absolutely recommend that they review those 5 years questions. You can always take the AUA review course that's offered. That's a decent course, but most of this can be done online to prepare yourself using the guidelines that exist for the AUA and using the last SASP. I saw going on to a different question, Roger, I saw that somebody asked, is the PEDS lifelong learning exam a low stakes exam? Yes, it is. But it is critical that you take that in the 7th or 8th year. If you take it in the 9th year and you do poorly and we have to reassign you CME credits, you may not have enough time to get those in before your certification comes up. So please concentrate on trying to take that recertification exam the 7th or the 8th year.
Doug, in the general module, anything you might direct people towards in terms of AUA statement documents, et cetera, that might be reasonable for them to review?
Other than, again, using what we have, the areas specifically that are listed to test, reading all the guidelines and any of the white papers that would be pertinent to those questions would be critical, Roger.
Thank you, Doug. There's a new question. I've submitted my practice logs already and met my other recertification requirements and was planning to take the exam in October. I'm in year 7 of my cycle. Can I defer my exam until next year without having to redo logs and recommendations, et cetera, et cetera? I'll take that one. The answer is yes. Your log and all the components of the application do carry over the next exam cycle. So if for some reason October doesn't work for you to do it, yes, all of this carries forward to the next year. So you're good for that. Brant, we've had a lot of questions related to other certificate statuses, mainly the clinically inactive and the retired status. Would you just mind giving the group a brief overview of take-home messages regarding both of those statuses?
Yeah, let me give a few take-home messages. There was a question about emeritus. Many of the folks that have been doing this for a few years remembered that Jerry Jordan brought up the possibility of an emeritus certificate. That was brought forth as a proposal to the American Board of Medical Specialties, and they shut it down and said, you know, there's not something out there that's an equivalent to, however, there's been a precedent set by many boards to do retired status. So we do have a retired status certificate now. And those requirements would be if you wrote the board and said, on this date, July 15th, 2020, I plan to retire. I will no longer see any patients. I'm in good standing with the board right now. Then we can basically grant you retired status, and you'll get a certificate that says, as of this date, it's honorary, so you won't be paying any fees. You won't be turning anything else in. You'll be a retired diplomat. Now, having said that, if you have any interest in potentially seeing patients again, that's not the method you want to take. So we do have a retired status certificate. It is on our website now, and it clearly explains exactly what that entails. If, on the other hand, one of these two situations is one you're in right now, for instance, we've had folks contact us and say, look, my hospital would really like for me to come back, do a little bit of work. It'll be mainly administrative work. I won't likely be seeing patients. What do I do then? Or I've been asked to come back in from retired status, and now what do I do to potentially re-enter? Better for me to actually take those phone calls from folks if they are not necessarily seeing as many patients, mainly administrative in nature. Be better for them to talk to me on the phone about what might be best for them. I think that would be easiest. And also for the retired status folks, for them to re-enter our process if they want to get out of retirement to now come back in and help with the COVID environment. That would be one where a lot of it depends on what they were doing before they retired, exactly how long they've been in that retired status, or how long, because we actually predated these all the way back 3 years. So the way this could work is if you've been out for quite some time, it may take jumping through a few hoops for us to get you back onto our active status. So be better to do that on a case-by-case basis. Very willing to talk to anyone that wants to discuss that further.
And Brent, do you want to just address clinically inactive as well?
Yeah, and I think clinically inactive is another place where we've gotten folks that are seeing very few patients any longer, or mainly administrative, and very willing to discuss that with folks if they would like to apply for that status. It's one where we generally have held that back to folks that are just seeing a handful of people. They've gone into a COO environment, an administrative environment, no longer operating. And in those cases, there would be reduced requirements for some of the lifelong learning. But a lot of that depends on exactly what nature of practice they have. So again, if they would like to look into that and they say, well, gosh, this is something that I'm not doing what I used to do, but I'd like to maybe talk about potentially looking into what clinically inactive would look like, very glad to talk to them and make sure we get some information to them.
Thank you, Brent. Just so everyone is aware, there is a link for information regarding the special certificate statuses, and that's ABU2, the number 2, abu2.org/retired. There's another new question. It's, can you address how the volume and diversity of surgical cases are addressed in your evaluation of surgical case logs? This particular individual is a subspecialist who performs very few general urology cases, and the concern is, will they be penalized? Also, if I am in an academic center with a 25 to 50% clinical FTE, will I be eligible to sit for oral boards? So Brent, perhaps let me just make a general statement. We do take into account subspecialty and specific foci within practice. And actually, it's pretty obvious when board case logs come forward that is indeed what you're doing. And obviously, we try to help you from the standpoint of the exam, pointing you in the direction of where you're actually practicing in some of the add-on modules, as we've discussed. So you have the general module plus a module that represents your practice, and your logs tell us that. So absolutely, we take that into account, and no, you're not penalized whatsoever for that. Matter of fact, that's more and more people are really becoming very highly focused in areas within the broad panoply of urology. And the fact that you're 25 to 50% clinical FTE, we do have minimum numbers, but usually even a 25% clinical FTE will get you to that very low bar of clinical activity. So don't feel that that will be a restriction whatsoever. Brent, you want to amplify that at all?
No, I would echo what you said, Roger. I think we understand that there are folks in infertility and in transplant and many of our smaller subspecialty areas, and that's what your focus is. we've tried to make sure that if your log reflects exactly what you've told us you do in your narrative, we look at your complications, your peer review, we look at your practice setting, the hours that you work, all of that's reflected in what you turn in. So we're looking at it all as one comprehensive look at your practice. And so, yeah, we absolutely do not want to penalize you for that. We want to make sure that if that's reflective of what you do, we give you credit for it, and we'll let you move on.
And that those comments also hold true for those of you who are about to undergo the cert or thinking about taking the certifying exam. We understand that. I mean, you finished a fellowship, your practice is going to be focused. So indeed, that's taken into account in the review of the logs. So there's just another question about COVID-19 surge. We've already discussed that. Again, we will manage that if it occurs. And Brent has already spoken regarding that specific issue. We very much appreciate your time. We have about 4 minutes left. I don't see any other questions arising. I do want to recognize the various members on this call who contribute greatly to the board, as do all the trustees. This is a real group effort. And again, I just want to thank the staff of the board office. They are a tremendous group of people, and they're there to help you and to work with you. And we, as I said in my initial comments, we really take pride in our communication. And so please understand that emails, phone calls are better. And as Brent said, many issues arise that really have nuances that are specific to unique individuals. And those are best handled by a phone call. And Jordan started this tradition, and Brent has just picked it up in a big way of making sure the lines of communication are open, and that they mean a lot to us as they do to you. And we take great pride, but also great focus in trying to get you a resolution to whatever concerns may be bothering you. Brent, do you have any concluding statements you want to make before we close things down?
No, I just want to thank everyone. Please remember when you call the staff that they're there to help. They're not there to hurt. Many of them are just messengers. They're not making policy. And so just want to make sure you remember that when you do call the office. We do all we can to try to make sure we answer your questions. And again, we do the exact same things that y'all are doing. None of the people on this board are out of the recertification process. We're all involved. So we recognize when something might be a little difficult to complete, always willing to help. We are not here to try to hurt in any way or hinder you. We want to help in every way we possibly can. I echo what Roger said. If you want to speak to Brent Thrasher, there shouldn't be any reason you can't. So call me. We're always available. We're always here to help. We'll remain flexible throughout this pandemic. And we really do take everything that you have to say to heart. And so these town halls have made big differences in what we've done, both in the testing environment, some of our policies, et cetera. So keep sending us in recommendations, and we'll keep considering those. We're certainly not going to toss any of them aside.
On behalf of all the trustees, I want to thank everyone who's joined us. As we mentioned previously, we will be doing this again. We will work with board office on getting that information out. One last point, that the board office is working remotely, obviously because of restrictions related to gathering. And we all know that that's changing state by state on a momentary basis. So I'm not sure where everyone will be tomorrow, even with mass gatherings or even being able to go to the office. But all the phones are still being answered at the board just like normal, as are all received communications electronically. So we wish you the best. Please stay safe out there. And thank you for being a member of what I think is the best medical specialty in the world, that being urology. Appreciate y'all. Take care.
Thank you.